he didn't, because these problems preceded it.
Dan Markel moved on, and this woman, Amy Adler, was everything Wendy wasn't. Welcome back to my channel, everybody. How are you? I'm Carolyn. I know I never announced my name at the beginning, but just so y'all know, my name is Carolyn, and I am from Moms for Justice. I have a podcast in the evenings on certain days of the week, but I also put out videos during the day. This is one of them. I wanted to talk to you about something I was thinking about. I woke up this morning, and I was like, well, have you ever heard of a story like the Adelson saga before, like even in a movie or a book? I thought to myself, not even on Netflix have I seen anything this crazy. Maybe this one show called Animal Kingdom, some mother who like uses her sons to do awful bad stuff, but I don't think we can top this real life drama that we got going on here with the Dan Markel murder. No one saw coming what was coming. And I was thinking today, like, what if they make a movie about this crime? Like, who would play Donna Adelson? Who would play Wendi Adelson? Like, I was like thinking like Meryl Streep maybe for Donna Adelson. Margaret Qualley would be a really good Wendy, I think. She was in that movie, The Substance, with Demi Moore. That's a really, really good movie until the ending. The ending's really stupid of that movie. But it's worth it to see just for the first, like, hour and a half. Also, for Donna, Glenn Close. I think Glenn Close would be, like, the most perfect Donna Adelson ever. So comment below who you would cast as your characters. Oh, Charlie, who would be Charlie? I mean, if you all saw that, I always compare Charlie to Fredo from The Godfather because he's just so much like Fredo. But anyway, who would you cast? Put it down below, comment. Also, the trial is coming up. It's just a couple weeks away, right? So give me a thumbs up if you think Donna's guilty. Give me a thumbs up if you think Wendy will be arrested. And give me a thumbs up if you think she will be found guilty too. So we're going to dive into this video on Amy Adler. Amy Adler was Dan Markel's girlfriend at the time of the murder. So she's really kind of a forgotten victim, right? We never hear about her, and she did not speak much. She kind of stayed out of the public eye. But yeah, she's a forgotten victim in this whole saga. So real quick, the beloved FSU professor Dan Markel, he was shot and killed on July 18th of 2014 after pulling into his garage. What came next, nobody expected. Everybody assumed all sorts of crazy stuff. You know, maybe it was work related. Maybe it was, well, I'll get to that. So this story you will not find in even your, favorite work of fiction. It's that crazy. Danny was methodically taken down by his ex-wife, Wendi Adelson, and her family by two hitmen. So, yep, her mother and Charlie, her brother, strategically did this to kill the man simply because he wanted to be a father to his kids. That's really what it comes down to, right? He wanted to be a father. He wasn't going to let anybody take his rights away. They just wanted to, like, bye, I don't like you anymore. Just get out of here. You don't exist. I don't need you to raise my kids. I'm just going to go down to Miami because you're not letting me, so I'm going to kill you so I can go down to Miami. Obviously, after any divorce, you need to work alongside your ex to compromise and share custody. It's just, everybody has to do it, right? Everybody has to do it. What makes you so different, Wendy? I have no idea. This woman. Wendy did not want to cooperate because she wanted to relocate. And Dan wouldn't let her. Of course he wouldn't. This then pisses off the mommy dearest from hell, Donna Adelson, Wendy's mother, and her dumb dimwit brother, Charlie. And well, you know the rest of the story, right? I won't go into all of it all over again because everybody knows it already. So, but today we are going to talk about Amy. Was Amy another motive to have Danny killed. Now, I know that's a stretch for some people, but hey, we got time on our hands. We're waiting for the trial. We're doing our best to keep ourselves occupied. And let me tell you, there's just so much here to dive into. And this is one that I don't think a lot of people think about. There is evidence from Wendy about having a lot of animosity towards Dan moving on and Amy. And I will show that. If you don't already know it, I will show it. So we're also going to talk about a certain someone that is connected to Amy that Wendy offers up to the police as someone who could have murdered Dan. So we'll get into that too. So Amy, don't hear her name enough, but guess what? Dapper Dan was finally trying to start a new life. And it started like this. So back after the separation, Danny really tried to stay with Wendy. He wanted to win her back, okay? He did not want this divorce, and he wanted to stay for the kids and work it out. They tried therapy, tried communication skills, exercises, whatever it is married couples do. But Wendy had made up her mind. And Danny was not worth her time anymore. You know what I mean? He was encouraged by neighbors and friends at that time to please just move on, date other people. And he would pal around with the FSU colleagues that him and Wendy used to be friends with. They kind of ended up hanging with Dan, like siding with Dan a little bit on this. So he was hanging out with the FSU colleagues who knew them both, and they would give him support and advice on how to move on from the situation. They were also I think bad talking her too, because they had heard, because she still worked there for a little while, had heard things she was saying bad about Dan. She was disparaging remarks about him. She was also, obviously we all know now that Wendy loves to have several guys going at the same time. I wouldn't even be surprised if she cheated on Dan. So they were cueing him in on that. Look, she's dating this guy, that, and he, there was people even from FSU that she was dating amongst, Dan's workplace. So neighbors recall him knocking on the door, showing up, basically looking for a place to vent, going to the neighbor's house down the street, the Greenbergs. He had, I think the Cohens were neighbors as well. They would listen to him and try to talk him off the ledge and tell him he needs to move on. And just everyone felt bad for Danny at that time. And it is said that Dan really did go through a difficult period of depression, which is common after splitting up, when you're madly in love with somebody who just all of a sudden you're on a business trip and she calls you on the phone and says, "I'm leaving you." And I really don't think Dan saw that coming, because I think that's how conniving she is. I think she had planned it long before that and did whatever it is she had to do to make him think that everything was fine, and waited for that one weekend. That weekend comes, he hears, she calls him on the phone. "I'm leaving you. I'm leaving. I'll be out of the house by tonight." He jumps on a flight, gets home, and shows up to a half-empty house with divorce papers on the bed waiting for him. I mean, oof, right? Talk about driving the dagger in. But then one day, while on a business trip to New York, and amongst legal circles, he meets the beautiful Amy Elizabeth Adler. So let's talk about her. Jewish, raised in New Jersey. Amy's parents were very accomplished. Father was Harry Adler, practicing attorney in Bridgeton, New Jersey. I'm originally from New Jersey. I don't know if anybody knows that. I'm from New Jersey. I don't live there anymore, but I know all about Jersey and New York, and I lived about maybe 30 minutes away from New York City. So anyway, father's Harry Adler, grew up in Bridgeton, New Jersey. Mother is Cynthia Adler. She's an artist. And her brother is famous Jonathan Adler, well-known American designer and famous for his bold modern furniture, pottery, lighting, etc. And he's a rich and famous millionaire. Okay? So that is very interesting. Amy is a legal scholar. She's a professor and an expert in art law and First Amendment law. So, a law professor at NYU and a national expert in art law, free speech, and feminist legal theory. Okay, she earned her undergraduate degree from Yale and her law degree from Yale Law School, and she clerked for Judge John M. Walker Jr. and later became a leading scholar at NYU. Let's take a quick listen to this clip. I'll make it real short, but just to give you an idea of how Amy presents herself and the way she talks, etc. So take a listen.
I first have to say I'm so delighted to be here, and I'm so just delighted to be in conversation with Joan and Virginia, two people whose views on art and law I respect so much and admire. So I'm excited for this conversation. And Joan, I think a couple of responses to your very provocative introduction. In trying to think of the genre of this piece, I think that's a really interesting question. I might think of it as a kind of howl, and maybe a howl of, to me, a very poignant howl, trying to grasp on to an image of the artist and the art world that I think was slipping away, and that you know, in the wake of the '80s art market, was in many ways a prescient howl about the role that the market would come to play. But I loved your pointing out about the time of this piece, 1990, because I agree so much with this positioning, this work, and I think in particular the idea of moral rights, which I'd love for us to talk more about. I think this is a text that really perfectly encapsulates the ethos of this idea of moral rights, the anti-copyright view incorporated into the Copyright Act about a work of art as sacred, as beyond the market, as deeply connected to the artist's soul. The work of art as the artist's child, as a personality right, as something that the artist has profound connection with beyond any sale of the work. It's really underlies the idea of moral rights, and the act of encapsulating moral rights in U.S. law was passed in 1990, the Visual Artists' Rights Act, which I hope we can talk even more about. But I think to a large extent that act would have actually helped Sarah, that I think he probably had a claim under that act that he didn't, because these problems preceded it. And I think the idea of Sarah is very interesting, this longing for permanence and control, and Sarah appearing in the work. Another thing that I think I was thinking about at this text is how much it's also an aspect of that moment when there was such a battle about government funding of the arts, and thinking about art as free speech, which was in fact the claim that Richard Serra brought in trying to stop the government from destroying his sculpture.
She is 57 years old in that video. It's insanity. I mean, she does come from a lot of money, so maybe she's had some work done. I don't know. But regardless if she had work or not, she's just absolutely a stunning, beautiful girl, or woman, should I say. She is very articulate, intelligent, and clearly knows her area of law. So their relationship is rooted in shared academic interests, okay? Mutual respect within the legal community, and she was previously married to Len Robbins in 2001. He worked as a sports writer in New York. Their marriage announcement was published in the New York Times, so it was a big hoopla. Some commonalities for Dan and Amy, I thought, just shows you just what a great match this was. Both being legal scholars at the top of their fields, Dan is in criminal law and legal theory, and Amy in First Amendment and art law. They shared intellectual background, would have made for a strong professional and personal chemistry. Both were recently separated when they began seeing each other, which may have created an emotional bond in itself because they're going through the same thing at the same time. Lots to, bounce off of each other about their significant former others. They each understood the toll of a difficult breakup, especially one involving public scrutiny. In Dan's case, the fallout with Wendy. Their academic life and values. So both lived and breathed academia. Dan was based at FSU, but remained tied to elite law circles, also communicating with professors all across the country through his prof's blog. He earned his degree at Harvard and Cambridge, as most of you know, and Amy was firmly rooted at NYU. Their worlds likely overlapped at conferences and through shared contacts. So also another thing, commonality, life stage. Both were navigating co-parenting. Dan had the 2 boys. Amy had a son with Len, her previous husband. Career focus and rebuilding their lives after separation and divorce. I mean, what more do you want, right? Dan and Amy's relationship was clearly heating up at the time of his murder. He was frequently visiting New York, and she was even Skyping with Lincoln and Benjamin, Wendy and Dan's kids. Which brings me back to Wendy. So I highly doubt that Wendy thought he could land somebody better than her after this divorce. I mean, Wendy becomes very jealous here, okay? Here's how we know that. So she's 50 years old. Amy Adler's 50 years old in 2014, and Wendy just wants to tell the world about that. Okay, in the interrogation with Detective Isom, when asked about Dan's life and other possibilities, she immediately said, well, he has this girlfriend, Amy. She's 50, and she's very beautiful. Why on earth would it be important to mention details like her age while you're being interrogated just hours after your ex was shot in the head? Why? Problem is that Wendy talks way too much and doesn't realize that she's digging her own grave. Appearances and social status is obviously very important to Wendy. So she comments just how beautiful after seeing her in person, okay, which is just before the murder. So Amy came to Tallahassee to visit with Dan and meet the kids in person. She was terrified of flying, but Dan convinced Amy to get on the plane and come on over, and she did it. Then Dan took her all over Tallahassee and met all their friends. And when I say all their friends, I mean he took Amy around to meet all the friends that he and Wendy used to be friends with. That had to make her burn, right? So I'm sure that this really pissed her off to no end. Wendy then meets Amy for the first time, because Wendy had plans to drive from Tallahassee to Miami for an 11-day stay for her dad's 70th birthday party. This is an infamous party where many of us do believe that the final planning of this murder was taking place. So Harvey flies to Tallahassee, okay, so that he can take the ride back to Miami with Wendy. A grown woman can't make a trip without her mom and dad, right? And Wendy was used to having Donna and Harvey fly up and drive down with Wendy so that the 7-hour trip, they could be with her. She did not need to have her mom or dad with her to drive. But so Harvey flew up, got in the car with Wendy to go pick up Dan and Wendy's kids at Dan's house because they were going to bring the kids down to Miami for the 70th birthday party. So Wendy also brought Harvey with her because she was insecure and afraid to go to the door because she knew Amy was there. So they head to Dan's house to pick up the kids, right? And Wendy was just terrified. And Amy comes to the door and meets her for the first time. Wendy reportedly said she was envious of Amy, viewing her as a rival. Keep in mind that Wendy always talked about the fact that Dan never cared about Wendy's career and that Dan wanted to keep her down at this level and never to rise to where Dan was. Also complained that he wasn't interested in reading her book because it was a work of fiction, and Dan did not like fiction. So she took that as not being supportive. Now, I will say, because I'm a fair, impartial person, and there's a lot of people on here that are just like, burn Wendy at the stake. If I hear something that doesn't sound right, just because I don't like Wendy doesn't mean I'm going to sit there and allow it to be said and not, stand up for what's right. So I do agree that if I wrote a book, my husband said, I'm not reading it, that's pretty unsupportive. I will say that. But anyway, with all that said, knowing that Wendy said that Dan was not supportive of her in other ways than just the book, like wanting to keep her down and not rise to the same level as him. Why would Dan choose a woman like Amy then? I mean, she's brilliant, intelligent, she's a sharp lawyer, clearly an equal, and possibly even more accomplished than him. If he was somebody that was like chauvinistic and didn't want his woman to rise to to the same level as him, why would he date somebody like Amy Adler? Doesn't make sense. Just something I wanted to point out. If you agree with that or you have something to say about that, below. So during the interrogation of Wendi Adelson with Detective Isom, they seized her phone, her computer, everything that was in her car, the whole 9 yards, even the car too. They examined that computer and she had a search history on it. It showed that she searched for Amy Adler multiple times. She searched Amy's ex-husband's name, Len Robbins, and Amy's brother, Jonathan Adler. So to me, this indicates a little bit of a fixation there, Wendy. A little bit obsessed. You're lurking, maybe a little jealousy in there, right? So around the same time, and this was brought up on my last video, but I'm going to say it because it's part of the investigation. Wendy was searching for teacher-student porn. She was searching it. I'm not shaming women who look up porn, but when it's teacher-student, you know what's going to pop up when you type in teacher and student. You know what's going to pop up, right? Why is she looking for that? Why? What does that say about her character? And honestly, it's a really out there. It doesn't match anything else. It's like this one piece of information about Wendi Adelson that sits over here like, huh? Doesn't make sense. So, but I want to put it out there because it is really bizarre. It's bizarre, and it makes you wonder about her a little more, right? So while Dan was visiting Amy on multiple occasions while they were dating, I imagine he was mingling with like a sophisticated upper crust crowd. He was in the Hamptons a lot because Jonathan Adler has a big mansion in the Hamptons. Just imagine it, right? Like rich and famous people all over the place. Drinks and dinner with Jonathan. This had to destroy Wendy's self-confidence and maybe even doubt the decision she had made to even leave Dan. Who knows? Wendy was definitely threatened by Amy. I'm sure she imagined that custody visits with Dan and maybe Amy as a future stepmother to Benjamin and Lincoln was a problem for her. Can you imagine her picking up the boys after like a long weekend visiting dad and stepmom Amy, bragging about how much fun they had in the Hamptons on the beach and with Uncle Jonathan? I mean, can you imagine how much that would have drove her nuts? This is something that would make her skin crawl. Wendy wouldn't have wanted another woman helping to raise her sons too. That's another thing I want to point out. I mean, we all know how she is, and there's just no way she'd let another lady in there to call any shots with her kids. So it makes it, I don't know. Let me keep going and tell me if you see anything as a possibility here, okay? As just a teeny motive there. Maybe the icing on the cake for her. I don't know. Because this is what Wendy wants. Wendy wants to be the most beautiful, the best, the prettiest, most important, and most successful. And she's starting to look like she's here, and Amy's looking up here. So just keep that in mind. Remember that Wendy was also bitter. So she says that Dan wanted Wendy to put the career on the back burner. And here he is now with this beautiful, successful attorney, a professor with industry connections and fashion-forward friends. Wendy only landed her job, remember, while riding off the coattails of Dan Markel. She got the job at FSU because Dan landed the job at FSU, not because Wendy earned it. I'm sorry, but I think her heyday was when she started some sort of charity thing when she was like a teenager, and that was about as far as it got for her. And then it just went wah 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 down the tubes after that. So this is very much unlike Amy who made a name for herself all on her own. So this has got to make her skin crawl. Even Lincoln and Benjamin, after meeting Amy, came to Wendy. Wendy, it's out there that Wendy has said this, that her boys came to her and said, Amy is so pretty. Maybe Wendy really wasn't that good of a lawyer. I mean, maybe she really sucked. And she's book smart. She's book smart. But she really is a social moron, right? And I think when it came time pass the bar and start to deliver, she couldn't deliver. All I know is it must have really hurt to be stuck in Tallahassee as jet setter Dan whisks off to New York City and the Hamptons to wine and dine his new brilliant, beautiful woman. Dan was moving up in the world, and Amy was an upgrade, a major upgrade. So during her interrogation, when asked who could have wanted Dan dead, she implies several people, and guess who was one of them? Amy's ex-husband, Len Robbins. I mean, how convenient, right? Clearly, by suggesting him, she is trying to steer the investigation away from her, along with mentioning Jeff Lacasse, and along with her mentioning, I don't know, some Jewish community, that Dan was involved with a case with a Jewish community of some sort, and that there was some bad blood between them. But how low can you go? How low can you stoop to bring up the ex-husband of his current girlfriend? I'm going to play about 5 minutes of a really key portion of her interrogation where she talks about Amy.
Money to anyone I can't imagine.
Okay. I mean, unless you have something I can't think of, I'm looking for some reason that someone would want to hurt him.
Not just hurt him.
Right.
I mean,
I know, but the intention.
I could see one of my friends wanting to shake him.
Right.
But with a gun.
Right.
No. No. With a gun.
Right.
No. No. I don't know who would do this. And I'm very scared because I don't understand why this would happen. He and I got along fine for the sake of the kids.
No, you didn't.
That's a dream. It was like, well, maybe we'll just take a walk around school. And
Right.
I mean, I found him hard to be around, but so did a lot of people. They all knew he meant well. He was a decent, good human being. He wouldn't hurt anybody. He would never do this to anybody. I don't know who would want to hurt him like this. I really don't.
All right. I need to ask you, was your divorce, you said before it had nothing to do with infidelity. No extramarital affairs or anything like that?
Neither one of us.
It was just simply the fact that you all just didn't get along anymore, or was it just the fact that he was belligerent to you?
He never hurt me physically, but he was emotionally abusive.
Okay.
And I didn't tell most people that, so all most people know is it just didn't work out, and it's just the kids are young, and this is just better this way. So other than my family, who saw the way he treated me, most people were, well, I think his family was very surprised. He told everyone around the community that I was mentally ill, because only a crazy person would leave him, and so there's a lot.
See, she needs to have an excuse because she knows that Isom is going to question people at FSU and their old friends, neighborhood friends, like I was just talking about before. These people kind of sided with Dan, and they kind of saw already. They saw this brewing with Wendy. They saw the way she behaved. I think some of them knew she was cheating at FSU with other professors, not just Jeff Lacasse, there's other guys. So she has to have a legitimate excuse to provide Detective Isom so that it makes sense when he gets faced with these various accounts of, you know, how unreasonable, what a terrible wife she was, and what she was doing to Danny and the kids. So her coming up with this, he's saying I'm mentally ill. I mean, I think it's twofold. I think she's using it to help her out by saying that, you know, he's saying I'm mentally ill so that, you know, he won't take other people's accounts seriously. But I also think that it is possible that he said she was mentally ill because she clearly is. We all know she is. She's a liar. She's a thief. And she has played all these guys around her. We all know everything she did to Jeff Lacasse. Daniel Sack, by the way, I'm doing a whole video on Daniel Sack, so that's coming up soon too. But just, she definitely comes off as like a psycho narcissist.
But, you know, who would, yeah, so that, I mean, that's it. The circumstances, plain and simple, were it just wasn't a really healthy marriage, and I thought it'd be better for the boys if they didn't grow up thinking that's the way you treat women. But he didn't hit me, he didn't hit them, he didn't have a drug problem, he didn't gamble, he didn't cheat on me, I didn't cheat on him. There's no other, I keep thinking the only like unknown I can think of is like Amy's ex-husband. Like, is he still in the picture? Is he upset?
Right.
Danny, I defriended him from Facebook because I found it too upsetting to like see intermittent pictures of the kids. But I wonder, he's very, very public on Facebook about like where he is, when he's traveling, where he's going, and so I wonder if he's got pictures up of him and Amy, and if there's a jealous ex-husband.
Yeah, she's putting that out there that he's very public because she wants to already plant into everybody's head that the hitmen would have only known how to, you know, get to Dan's house and how to notify, you know, like a exact timeline of what Dan did. Who would be able to know that information? She knows that everybody would say that Wendy has his schedule more than anybody down pat. So she's setting herself up in this interrogation by offering up that he lets everybody know every little thing about him so that it broadens the suspect pool.
Do you know where this ex-husband would be?
He'd be in New York too.
Is he also an attorney?
I don't even know his name.
Okay.
I just know
Okay, so she lied right there because the search history on the computer shows that she searched her ex-husband, Len Robbins, that exact name. So for her to sit there, it's just another lie right then and there. You hear it, right?
When Amy came down here, they went over a mutual friend of ours. It's a guy that works at the law school. This guy Jay and his wife Dory is a good friend of mine, and they have kids my kid's age. And I said to her, I remember saying, so what's she like, you know, like she met her before I did, and she said, you know, she's really nice and she's, you know, very sweet, and she's recently divorced too, so she knows how awkward all of this is to meet the new person. I don't know, and I'm scared.
Okay. Have you had anything happen at your house?
No.
Nothing?
Uh-uh.
And the information for Best Buy, for the service tech that was there, that's at your house?
I'd be happy. I mean, if someone wants to
Yeah, we'll
come
get
back
that.
with me.
We'll get that. And that was basically from when he came out there to serve, well, I guess to replace the
He
TV.
came out to fix it and then told me that what was wrong with it wasn't fixable.
Right.
And so I called Charlie to find out, should I buy a new one or should I fix
Right.
this one? And he was like, just buy a new one.
Yeah, she knew it wasn't fixable.
And once he left, do you remember what time the serviceman left?
Probably around 10, a little
10.
before 10. And then I left by 12.
But between that time, between 10 and 12, you were by yourself working on your papers and stuff.
Yeah.
Were you doing on papers or computer?
It was all on computer.
Okay.
And that's what I was thinking. I was like, I sent some edits in to someone at the law library
All right.
during that time.
Okay.
I called a few friends. I sent some texts. I mean, all of that'll be
On the phone?
on the phone.
Or did you call from your house phone?
I don't have a house phone.
Okay, you use all your communications is over your cell phone?
Yeah.
Do you have more?
And WhatsApp.
No.
Okay. All right. I'm going to introduce you to a victim advocate.
Most of you have already seen this interrogation, and you know that she goes on to say, Amy is 50 years old. She's so pretty. Really odd thing to say in the middle of an interrogation when your ex is, dying in the hospital from a gunshot wound to the head. Sorry, just really crazy. So Dan was scheduled to leave and traveled to New York to see Amy on the 19th, July 19th, 2014, which I think was a possible tipping point for Wendy, because this relationship was working out. It was going well. And I'm not saying it's the motive, people. I'm not trying to get crazy here, but it's definitely a benefit to Wendy. Because she did not like this woman and I don't think she wanted this relationship to turn into a marriage and him have all these amazing opportunities and running around with all these great, rich and famous people and, the kids thinking that Amy is pretty. And I just think she's just so jealous. And she, just another reason why I want to get rid of Dan. That's what I think. As we all know, he wasn't able to make that trip on the 19th. Who was murdered on the 18th and died very early in the morning on the 19th. He was taken off life support. She did not go visit him in the hospital. She had every opportunity to go visit him in the hospital. She knew that he had no family in town. They were still in Canada. How heartless can you be? I get why you don't bring your kids there because you don't know what's going to traumatize them and what's not. But at least show up. Hold his hand, say, I'm here, something. He had a neighbor come and sit with him around midnight. And the neighbor would have had no way of knowing that he was not going to make it. He just knew he was in dire straits and that he was going to come back the next day and visit him again. But he left and Dan did not make it. And he was all alone. He was all alone. So what was Amy's reaction to this murder? Well, we don't know a whole lot, but what we do know was she was very scared, too scared to go to Dan's funeral on the 20th, according to his friend Tamara Demko. Amy does make statements to the police, though, and I have them here. I'm going to read them off my notes. In a report, it states that Amy Adler was identified by the Markel family and others as Dan's girlfriend. I spoke to her on several occasions by phone in the days and weeks immediately after the murder. She was very emotional during the initial calls. Amy is a law professor at NYU. She is separated from Len Robbins, and they have a 9-year-old son together. Their pending divorce is amicable. Amy said she and Dan started dating in November 2013. They would see one another when he traveled to New York City, primarily. Amy did visit the one time in Tallahassee at the end of June 2014. She claimed, I have no knowledge of Markel being bothered by anything or threatened in any way. Of course not. Again, doesn't do drugs, isn't a gambler. I mean, this is an upstanding, tax-paying citizen. There's, of course, no threats at all. She acknowledged that she met Wendy and the kids in Tallahassee. Amy was familiar with the ongoing dispute between Markel and Wendy. She was told by Markel about the financial disclosure discrepancy and the fallout Wendy may incur as a result of fraudulent disclosure. Amy could not provide a possible motive for the murder. She did not believe her estranged husband could be involved in any way, and Amy provided Len's cell phone number and place of employment. Then in the report is information about Len Robbins. Mr. Robbins was contacted by FBI agents in Brooklyn, New York on July 30th, 2014. He was cooperative and provided background information on his relationship and stated it was amicable separation from Amy Adler. It was determined that Mr. Robbins was in New York City on the date of the homicide. Amy does go on to get married very, very quickly after the murder of Dan, within like months. I know that's quick, but it's true. But found that in 2020, Amy Adler shared a personal post on her LinkedIn mentioning that she was divorcing her husband, Jason, after 6 years. So she married somebody named Jason. I don't have his last name, but the marriage did not work out and they ended up divorcing. She reflected by saying, "This is a tough year leading up to our divorce and another difficult year of recovery from illness due to stress." You think? I would think this woman would have stress for the rest of her life. I mean, she's been through something horrendous, and she's kind of like a lost chess piece in this whole thing. She was on Georgia's witness list for Charlie Adelson's trial, but she was never called. And I would imagine that there is just not much she could testify to. Because I don't think it would be allowed in. She could talk about his character, right? But anything Dan might have said to her about Wendy, it would just be thrown out as hearsay. What do you think, guys? What do you think about Amy Adler playing any part in Wendy's decisions in Dan's death? Do you think that it was on her mind and it factored in any way? I'm curious. Be interesting to know what you guys think. I do hope that if there is something Amy can offer that could lead to an indictment and conviction of Wendi Adelson, I hope that they have something or she'd come forward with it. But probably not. I do have videos coming up on Daniel Sack and Robert Adelson. Please let me know not only other characters in this saga you would like me to do a deep dive on, but also other crimes. What other crimes are you all following? I want to hear about them. Now, I follow so many, so I'm just, looking to hear what everybody wants to hear about. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, share, comment below, and I will see you next time.